Right, so it is that time of year again when the leaves are well and truly falling off the trees and the fish is getting so much harder. And for me, that means a lot of expandery, ground baity, a lot more softer baits come into the equation. Me favourite hard pellet seems to go out the window. And what I like to focus on quite a bit at this time of year is a lot of silverfish matches. In a bit of a change to the norm, so I'm not a fan of the natural venue-y, struggling type matches. I'm a big fan of commercial type silverfish matches where there's lots and lots of fish to be caught. And at them style of venues, fish meal is massively, massively important. Do you know what I mean? It still leads to a lot of pellet fishing, which is my favourite way of fishing. It's what I feel I'm quite good at. It's what I stick to. It's my confident way of fishing. And if I can fish pellets, it's what I do. And what I want to go through today is a few little sneaky tips for me that just make me catch so many more silvers when I can use pellet-based ground baits, when I can use what I want, depending on fisheries and all that sort of thing, of course. But the little twists and turns that you can feed your bait in so many different ways and different baits you can use on the hook they get you so many more bites when you're fishing for these pretty much skimmer fishing is what I'm going to focus on for this video. Firstly, dead quick rundown without going too pluggy is the bait. Yeah, choosing the right bait that behaves in the right way for me, it's massive. Your bait's got to look right, it's got to be presentable, it's got to be good quality, it's got to be decent bait. And when I'm allowed, before we touch on any hookable ones, I want to use my own pellets if I'm allowed, and a ground bait that's right for catching skimmers, you know what I mean, a fish meal bait. In fact, let's talk about the ground bait first, because that's definitely something I tend to use a lot when allowed. So there's not a lot of venues, one of the venues I fish silvers on, you're not allowed ground bait, but so if allowed, mixing a ground bait and introducing a tiny bit of ground bait when fishing pellets, it definitely speeds your peg up. It's so much more of a quick start to your peg than just feeding pellets on their own for whatever reason. I don't know, it must be a bit more smell in the water, a few more bits, a bit more attractive. Whatever it is, ground bait definitely speeds up the process of dragging fish into your peg when used in the correct amounts. And what I'll always choose is a fish meal based mix. Yeah, I'll never vary from the fish meals, not a commercial, because that is what these fish eat. I mean, they see pellets going in 365 days of the year. It's what they're brought up on. They know what that taste is. That is what attracts them into the peg. So I always want to choose a fish meal type mix, which in that case, the sweet fish meal is just a bit different. I mean, I've got the option of catching other species over it as well. So, I mean, a bit of a hybrid-y sort of ground bait that's very, very popular these days. But for me, it'd be probably my first choice when I'm just targeting skimmers. If I was going to catch F1s and skimmers in the same peg, I'd probably go for the milled expander. I mean, just a pure milled expander, mixed in exactly the same way as I'm going to go on about. That'd be me choice of ground bait for any time I'm going to kickstart my peg with a bit of ground bait. Pellets, bit of a weird one. All I want is the right pellet. Do you know what I mean? What they're flavoured with, I mean, it's all confidence. We've talked about that many, many times. And the basic F1 ones, there seems nothing's doesn't like them, if you like. They'll always catch fish. I don't feel that skimmers don't like that flavour, so they're perfectly happy to do that, to feed over that. But what they do, the go-to ones, they allow me to swell my micro pellet up to the maximum that a pellet possibly can without going to mush, which I spoke about this hundreds of times in the past with using the right micros when you feed in certain ways on the pole. You want your pellets to stay as pellets. The last thing I want is them to go to mush and become ground bait and a mess on the bottom, because they're not doing what I want them to do. Do you know what I mean? I may as well just feed ground bait in that case. I want pellets to be able to swell up to, as you'll see in a minute, to the maximum they can and hold as pellets. So I've got a few options of feeding them in two different ways, but I've also got the option of putting them on the hook, which is a sneaky little tip that we'll talk about in a minute. That dependent though, as I say, that's when I'm fortunate enough that I can use my own bait, which unfortunately is a bit of a rarity at many venues these days, is being able to use your own pellets. Doesn't happen a lot, but if you can, so those ones just swell up massively. See them, they swell up really big pellets that I can put on the hook. If I can't put them on the hook, that's when I go down the expander route. And of course as well, when I use a bigger expander on the hook, a 4mm, if I want to choose a 4mm pellet, then definitely the batch at the minute that we've got are both the catalyst ones and the go-to ones, which are, so they're the same pellet, just treated in different ways. The batch at the minute is phenomenal. Yeah, they're the best expanders I've had since borderline back on the old days when we used to have the lovely golden ones about 10 years ago. So the expanders at the minute, they're just spot on. I mean, they're the best batch that stay solid, don't break down, and don't swell up too much as well, which I feel is important. You know what I mean? I want a pellet that stays nice and dense, doesn't go great big and fluffy, it just stays nice and tight and it doesn't come off the hook as easy. That said, I'm not a massive fan of 4mm on the hook for this, just because I definitely feel that for F1's great. Yeah, you'll catch plenty of F1s with a 4mm on the hook and some carp as well. Skimmers, I think they're fussy. I think they like little tiny ones, which, well, what I really want is either to be able to put the F1 ones on the hook if I'm allowed. So don't get me wrong, I could even prepare a little batch for just on the hook, but just for easiness, if anything. I don't know what size we actually sell them as, a 3mm, but I'm not even going to say that. I'm going to say they're about a 2.5. The really little tiny expanders, say the same again, both in the Cat and the Go-To, they do them in. They're the same as the standard Go-To pellets, obviously the unflavoured ones, but they've just been treated. So it just saves you the job of faffing about, treating them as yourselves, because you find that if you try and flavour expanders yourself, it can be a little bit fiddly and it can alter the consistency of your pellet, depending on what liquid you put on, how much. So because they're ready done for you, nice and easy, straight out the tin, and give me a bit of confidence because they smell different to the bloke on the next bag. But preparing them for these, I'm going to call them 2.5s, but the 3mm, the really little tiny expanders, I can't put anything else on the hook. When it comes to winter time, again, you'll see them now, it just blends in perfectly with your micro pellets, which is what I'm after. Yeah, and they're a bit less fiddly than trying to hook a micro, but they just blend in. Yeah, and that's all I ever want when it comes to pellet fishing, whether it's hard pellet fishing in the summer, whether it's soft pellet fishing now. Just personally, I'm never a big fan of using a bigger pellet than what I've got, than what I'm feeding, because I do feel that, yes, it stands out as a standout bait that they could pick up, but I also feel in the winter months when they're a little bit more skeptical on the bait that they eat, that will they pick that big one out? I'd rather have one that just blends in, that I know that if they're feeding on that type of pellet to me peg and I've got one on the hook, I'm going to catch a fish, or I've got a better chance of catching a fish. Whereas if I've got a different pellet, maybe a bit bigger, then they could, as easily as it could stand out and they could eat it, it could easily stand out and they avoid it for that reason. So you've got to mix and match a bit and decide what's best on the day for you. But so focusing on the bait a little bit more, using the perfect bait for the situation, it's a big one for me, and definitely helps with what I'm trying to achieve in the winter. So I'm going to whiz there quickly. I just want to go through me prep bait to show you exactly what I'm going to do to, fingers crossed, extract a few skim bobs out of this lovely lake today. So bait all prepped. I want to just go through what is what. So firstly, ground bait, before we touch on that, dead easy. I just want that wetted as much as I possibly can. That's really heavy mix that's going to go down, sink lovely, and it's been riddled. Don't want to touch on that because it's ground bait. There's not a lot to it. The pellet's the important bit. As I say, and I've got my pellets. What I've done, same as always, just cover them in water, leave them, let them soak up to the maximum. I want them really big, spongy pellets. And if Rich has a zoom in a minute, we'll have a look at all them individual pellets. They're massive, big, lovely micros that, say there's no mush, there's very little mush in my bait. It's all lovely little individual pellets that when they're on the bottom out there, they are individual pellets. They're not breaking down to a ground bait. And what they actually do, I've got me 2 lots of expanders. I've done far too many expanders as usual, which is a bit of a waste, unfortunately, but for you lovely lot on this, we've got to show you what's going on. And what I've got me 3mm here, 2.5s, nice little ones, but me 3mm ones here that you can see when I mix them with my micros, they're very similar. Yeah, so as long as I can get a decent micro pellet or whatever, fishery pellets, or whether I can use my own Go-To ones, they're very similar in size, but I get a little bit more robustness, I'm going to say. You stay on the hook a little bit better by using an expander pellet on the hook. So I prepare plenty of them that they're going to blend in. I can feed some if I need to prep some to sink. I can put them in my peg if I'm allowed. So they blend in beautifully with my micro pellets, which is all I'm after. I want my fish to come in, eat my micro pellets, and eat my expander as it's one of the micro pellets sort of thing. That's for when it's fishing for these skimmers, absolutely huge. But I've also, as I say, I've done a few 4mm. Well, which is how we've done them, but I've prepared them in exactly the normal way. But as I said, the 4mm, while not my massive confidence bait for catching fish in this way when skimmer fishing, whenever I'm fishing me expanders and micros for F1s and such things, at the minute the batch is absolutely phenomenal. They're so dense, non-porous, I think is the word. I mean, they're really dense, the pellets, and they just make them stay on the hook. I mean, I can give it the big Zorro strikes and everything. They ain't going nowhere as long as they're prepped in the right way. I've got them nice and sexy. So I've got them there just in case I want to feed some of them. Pretty much, you know what I mean, it's that basic. For me skimmer fishing, the only additional bait I might have a few maggots on the hook. Yeah, a little pot of dead maggots just for on the hook, maybe feed a couple, but said the emphasis is always on pellet fishing, getting as many bites as I can. So I'm going to have a little rundown. I've snuck a little bit of bait in there. Hopefully we'll have a few fish feeding. I'm going to go a bit fishing-y and just have a little bit rundown of the important ways I've got to fish my rig, and then a few ways of feeding this, just hopefully get a few skimmers going. But say it's that basic for a day skimmer fishing It's such a simple, easy way and cheap as that your bait lasts you such a long time, but it's just so productive in catching them little, I'm going to say nasty skimmers that are sort of 2 to 10 ounce, that when fishing any other baits, they can just be so hard to catch. But so with this, it makes it nice and easy with a bit of luck. Quickly, before I ever go, yeah, what I'll do, just to keep everyone happy, I just want a little quick prepping of the expanders. Say that a video that has been done a million times before, but it's got to be done right. You know what I mean? The last thing I want is pellets that have had too much water that are just, I mean, fully a party, pain in the bum because they come off every strike. I want a nice dense pellet that we spoke about for ages. And all we need to do this, feel like Blue Peter, is normal bag of expanders in a bag. Yeah, I'm not going to waste too many this time. I'm just going to do a little batch. I'm going to pop some of them. What have we gone? We've gone with 3 millis. I'm going to tip some of them in the bag. They smell lovely now. Lovely. So tip some of them in the bag. Desired amount, that's enough for about £1 million worth of skimmers, but I hope that'll do. I'll be having them in the corner of the bag with a wee bit of water on them. So I'm not fussed about what water. If we have tap water, it don't matter. Promise me, it don't make a difference. And what I do, get them in the corner of the bag like that, so they're all nice, and then we squeeze them so the water almost comes out. So they're all in water, but they've not got too much, and then I get rid of that bit. So we don't want that little bit of water in. Get rid of a little bit more. There we go. So they're in a nice little tight corner, and they're just submersed under the water, and then I'm going to twist it. Yeah, so they've got very, very little room to expand. Get rid of a bit more water. So they're sort of encased in that little bubble with no air, a little bit of water, but because they're trapped in the area that they've got, they can suck the water in, but they don't expand too much, so they stay lovely and tight all together, which makes them really, really easy to put on the hook. The only issue being, so it's weird that the contrasting colours as well, and how much lighter they will eventually go. They don't half lighten up once you've left them for an hour or so. The only thing that does happen is that all my pellets float. I mean, when they're prepped in that way, so everything floats. So I need my little tub of water, and I'm perfectly happy to pick my pellet out, give it a little squeeze, make sure it sinks, then put it on my hook. We've spoke about this lots and lots of times before, but by prepping your pellets in that way, for me, it without doubt gives you a better performing pellet on the hook. Yeah, it's not had the time in the water for allow it to go all weak and soggy and fully expanded. Instead, it's got that robustness to it that keeps on my hook so much better. But because I've checked it in my little pot of water, I know that it'll already sink, but with the addition of the weight of my hook in it, it's going to keep it rock solid right on the bottom, as heavy as possible, which is where I want it to be. So, time to catch a few fish. Right, so all bait sort of covered. There's one jumping out there. I want to, we'll go a bit technical, a bit tippy bit. This is the good bit for me. And when it comes to fishing, say, for these little skimmers, or even F1s in quite a few cases, but when I'm using these tiny, tiny pellets, positivity is the massive, massive thing. Is showing bites up. So now it's gone cold, them fish are, they're feeding very, 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 very carefully. They're very delicate, I suppose, is the way. And skimmers, for me, they're the worst of the worst. The amount of times you lift up and there's one on, if your rig isn't right, it's unbelievable, because they just don't move off of your bait. So very susceptible to feeling anything that's wrong. So rig-wise, we've got wire stem float, 4/16s, because we're fishing in a bit of water. We're fishing in 6 foot. But really, really positive shots in down bottom end. Yeah, it's all number 8s. I've literally got 7 number 8s, but the key thing is where the positioning of my bottom number 8 is. Yeah, we spoke lots and lots about my curve and all that sort of size, sort of thing, and show me bites up. But for this one, it's showing them bite up as quickly as possible, because those fish, they just don't move. They literally suck it in and they will spit it back out with barely moving. So what I need is my bite to show up as quickly as possible. So what we have for whenever we're fishing expanders for silverfish, definitely for skimmers, is I have a little hook length. I've got a little tiny hook length there of 4 inches, and I've got my first number 8 actually on the loops. So that'd be a massive tip I'd give you that for your winter F1 fishing or winter silverfish fishing, is by having that number 8 on my bottom loop. What it does, it helps to straighten out them loops, because I hate them kicking off or anything like that. Even a perfect loop doesn't sit beautifully. So a little added bit of weight straightens all that up lovely. But what it does, it only gives the fish, slightly less than 4 inches for it to be able to move to show me a bite up. And with that being a big shot, say, again, something I've mentioned before, big Al number 8, 4 inches away from the hook, it shows my bites up really, really, really quickly. Because the beauty about fishing your micros and expanders is you never have to worry about fish through the water. Yeah, they are always on the bottom, on a plate. That's where you're getting your bites, because that's how those fish want to feed, because of the bait and because of how you feed it, keeps them on the bottom. But say that is without doubt for me, whenever the expanders are out the bag, whether it's the little ones or whether it's the 4 mils, having that tiny little length in between your bottom shot and your hook, it's everything. You know, it makes a difference between 10 bites and seeing 20 bites. I mean, it really does show up what's going on with me pellet on the bottom. So hook wise, something nice and delicate as well. So in that case, I've gone with an 18. I might tell you fibs, it might be a 16. No, that's a 16 MXC5. I mean, the usual, I've used them for dobbing, but I also like them now for me little expanders, when I'm likely to put on a 4 mil, a 2.5 mil, or 3 mil, or a thingy, or a maggot. They're the baits that I'm always going to put on. That lovely little hook just mounts them perfectly, so it just looks right. When you put a micro pellet or a little expander on a hook, it's got to look proportional for me, or the fish aren't going to have it. So choosing the right style light hook with a nice decent gauge on it, that is the perfect job for impaling an expander. So we're going to have a little go at catching a fish. So I'm going to go in first with one of these little expanders. So I've prepped the peg with the tiniest little bit of bait, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pinch of expanders and make them all sink just by giving them a squeeze in my tub. And then I'm going to pick one for on the hook. Lovely. And I'm actually going to feed a couple as well. So luckily here at Cudmore we can feed what we want, but you'll have a look at that. He just looks right. Yeah, proportion wise for that size of hook with a 3 mil. It's definitely smaller than a 3 mil. There probably is a 3 mil, isn't he? A lovely little expander, a blending in expander that blends in with my micro pellets. That is exactly what I want. And what I'm going to feed is just a pinch of my expanders that I know that sink. I've just made them sink. Just going to put 3 or 4 of them and mix in with a little tiny pinch of micro pellets as well. Not many at all. I'm feeding about 15 pellets today. So it's just about getting a fish into me peg at this time of year and getting a bite off it, which is why I like avoiding the standout hook baits, because yeah, as I say, it does stand out, but I also think it could be a reason why they avoid them when it's ultra hard at this time of year. So with a bit of luck now, there's one waiting for us. This is a bit scary, this. We've not actually had a go. I'll tell you a lie, I've had 2 minutes and I caught a gudgeon. We've not actually nailed any skim bobs yet, but now that they've had about 20 minutes to settle, so we're going to feed that nice and loose just to give them a bit of an area to graze over. So often when I'm fishing for F1s, I want it as tight as possible, that bait, so I might feed it in a clump just to get it down to the bottom. With skimmers, and when I'm only feeding tiny amounts like that, what are we going to say, 15 pellets maybe, by sprinkling them in, or I mean tapping them out my pot, not sprinkling them with a sprinkler, tapping them out in one hit sort of thing, away from the water, while the pellets are still loose. They just spread a little bit more. They probably give me a 10 or 12 inch spread on the bottom, which 15 pellets over a 10 inch square, they nearly vanish. Do you know what I mean? It's just a lovely tiny little bit of bait that's going to sit nicely. We don't know what he is. He might be. Oh, he was a skim bob as well, Rich. He was a skim bob. That's me being not pulling hard enough. But you see how well that shows up them bites. As soon as the fish are on it, you see the bite so quick because I've got that shot so close to my hook. Same again, them lovely little females. I love how they look. They're such a lovely colour as well. Just blend in perfectly with my micros. I'm going to feed that again, but not with quite as much. About 10 micros this time. So what I don't want, you tend to find that with the skim bobs, I don't want to feed pretty much every cast. So I may do for the first 2 or 3 fish just to see what's going on. But because I'm fishing such a heavy rig, the last thing I want is them to come and start intercepting my pellets off the bottom on the way down. So I may cut it back to feed in sort of a full little pot every 2 or 3 fish. So if that's enough, I want them grazing, not getting excited. Same again, just tap that little lump of pellets in and that descends lovely as it spreads. Quite liking that. That was a nice quick bite. Same again with that lovely down, nice and quick. Here we go. And see how everything shows up so fast with these skimmers now, these ones that we're catching. Hopefully this one won't fall off. There is no worse fish this size of skimmer for showing up bites. They're an absolute pain in the bum. But say with them little pellets and big shot right next to me pellets, it just allows me to to see a bite as soon as it happens, and you can see with where that one's hooked, yeah, you are seeing that bite immediately. It's never ever in the back of the throat. It's always right where the lip is, because you're seeing the bite the second it happens. And it just makes these little ones that, so they're so good weight builders for them silverfish matches that we're fishing this time of year, but it makes them so much easier to catch than when using traditional baits or with longer hook lengths with less shot on the rigs. So positivity is number one in this game. So we're gonna try and catch a couple more just to see what they do. So this time I'm not gonna feed though. As I say, if I keep on feeding, so I'm likely to really upset them fish, make them come up in the air. Instead, I want them on the deck, just getting bites. Well, we're not liking this rain, Rich. Right, so we've had another, it's a bit big one. I took it a bit longer that time though, which is a bit weird. Yeah, not feeding that cast. This took a little bit longer to get a bite. So we definitely need a bit more bait yet to prep the peg. But as you can see, I need to get rid of it. Don't like that. These are the exact babies I'm talking about. The serious, we nearly lost him, Rich. The serious adderupperers, the little slimy things. Them serious adderupperers. So you see he's hooked again, every single one, bang on. Yeah, what you're gonna give me on them? 3 to the pound sort of size skimmers. So them little 3mm expanders, for me, it's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying in how many fish you catch on them compared to fishing natural baits like maggots and even putting a 4mm on. So I think it'd be all right today, we'd probably catch a couple with just being us here. But the amount of times I've done this, put a 4mm pellet on, you just simply don't get a bite, or you wait a lot longer for the bite instead of putting a little blending in hook bait on, these little tiny ones. Just get you a bite so much faster. I say, whether it's F1s, skimmers, whatever else. So for me, the little pellet time of year is well and truly here. I say I'm all about catching that 1 or 2 more fish than everyone else, just because my bait's better, just because it's right, because I'm using the right bait that the fish aren't scared of, sort of thing, or aren't cautious of. Yeah, it definitely puts me ahead of the game blending in. Lovely. That is working just where we want it to. So it's not fast and furious. I'd say I definitely feel that I'm catching the vast majority of any proper skimmers that come into my peg. I don't feel like there's fish present. I feel like I'm just catching them as they come into my peg, which is exactly how I want it in this way. So it proves to me, or I hope it proves to me, that they're never avoiding my bait. They're always picking out, let's lift him up, they're always picking out that little pellet because it's blending in with the other pellets. And for me, so there's no better way of catching some lovely skimmery commercial silvers. So hopefully we're gonna have a lovely winter catching lots and lots of them. So hopefully that was a nice little tippy one with a bit of bait prep mixed in. So hopefully I'll be able to catch you a few more skimmers just by finding things down a little, so making things nice and positive with your shotting of your rig as well.